Welcome to the Podium Pod, the Pick and Rolls National Basketball Podcast, as we begin the road to Paris 2024. I'm Adam Webster, and I'm joined today by two men instead of just one because, of course, the real thing has begun. I'm joined by, firstly, my Tasmania Jack Jumpers broadcast partner, Jacob Doole. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on again. It's, as you say, an exciting time to be going live and talking through a real Boomers win.
We have been so stressed the last couple of hours. One man that has been stressed because he's not from here and he's just looking at this as like really good basketball is Marc Campbell. Marc, welcome back to the Podium Pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Here we go.
It's been a really stressful few hours. Guys, I want to start with the fact that I ride or die with this team every single time they come out on the floor and play like a really meaningful game. And it was really stressful today because they got punched in the mouth. So Spain closed. They had a really good first half. Spain closed to 56-54 in the third quarter. Of course, we can't barely lead. The Boomers have won their first group game, 92-80. They've defeated Spain in their first group game of the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. But we need to talk about the most stressful part straight off the bat. The Boomers closed with a 15-4 run to lead at the final break, 69-60. Marc, we talked about adversity. We talked about what happens when you come up against adversity. Do you stick to your plan? Do you do the things that got you here to the dance in the first place? And the Boomers did it.
Yeah, they met it head on. It was awesome. There's the Mike Tyson quote about getting punched in the face, and everybody's plan goes out the window as soon as they get punched in the face. And the Boomers took Spain's best shot. They were downhill the whole game. Spain battled back 56-54, and there was a moment where they all tried to do it themselves, and there was a calm that came over. They reconnected as a unit. They started trusting each other, and I think Jock Landale was the one that really just propelled them forward. He was the main protagonist of bringing them back together, and he really pushed the Boomers, over the line there to respond.
Jock Landale finished with 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 rebounds and 4 assists. Now, the plus minus, Jacob, is something that we have to talk about here with Jock. Greg Popovich has a famous sort of view of plus minus on an individual game-by-game basis where he hates it. It's his least favorite stat. But in this case, the eye test and the plus minus did match. What was Jock Landale's plus minus in this contest, if you don't mind?
Plus 30 for Jock Landale tonight, and you're right. That I don't think plus minus on its own in one game for one player can be read into too much. But when it's that massive and it lines up with exactly what your brain is telling you is going on out on the court, you can't completely ignore it. And Jock Landale was just everything the Boomers needed and more tonight. When things were flowing, he was in the flow. When things weren't, he was digging them out of a hole, just doing every little thing right. And that really was, I think, the difference maker.
Yeah,
Marc,
absolutely.
He was a steadier, right? Like the Boomers had that moment early on where Usman Garuba and Will Magnay came together and Josh Green was involved. There were a couple of unsportsmanlike fouls. And to be fair to Will, he played a solid game in parts, but kind of threw him off his game and Australia sort of started to try and fall into a hole. And Jock Landale was a big part of the reason that they could come back from the brink of giving up that lead, and in fact, just giving up that lead. What did Jock Landale do so well to try and wrest the lead back from Spain and then wrest the momentum back?
Yeah, he was great in the pocket of the pick and roll. He had two things really stood out for him. He was great in the pocket, and when things got tough and the game slowed down and it got really muddy, they could give it to him on the block. He was on the right block, and it was pound, jump hook, left shoulder, jump hook, left shoulder, jump hook, left shoulder. And when you have a guy like that, when everything's really tough to get to and defensive pressure is there and you can isolate him and you can just say, hey, we need one right here. And everything slows down a little bit and he can get into that left shoulder jump hook. To me, having somebody who can really carry you home like this when things get tough, that mattered. This was a big bucket right here, 62-59, backs against the wall, and they just kept going to him, and he brought it home for him.
He was unbelievable. So, Jacob, we've talked about Jock Landale. We do also need to reference Josh Giddey in this contest because if there was a player of the game, Jock Landale would probably get the 3 votes, and Josh Giddey would probably get the second place vote. He had 17 points, 7 of 12 shooting, super efficient, 8 rebounds. He had 8 assists as well, 5 turnovers. So, Marc, you and I talked a lot about that assist-to-turnover ratio. So, Jacob, I'll start with you. What did you love about Josh Giddey's game against Spain?
I really love, particularly in the first half, just how aggressive he was in sort of hunting his own shots still in the flow of the offense. I think the question mark about Josh Giddey on this Boomers team previously was he's going to be the best player on this team at some point, but can he be quote unquote the guy? Like, is he going to be closing out games or keeping the team close when the buckets dry up? Like, can he get those shots for himself? It's something he's been able to do in the lead into this tournament. And again, in this game, he had 15 points at halftime. So Jock Landale kind of closed it out, but it was Josh Giddey scoring the ball that sort of built that lead early on. And that's something that we haven't really seen from him at the NBA level. So to see him be able to slot into this Boomers team again and really get wherever he wants and get his shot off, I think was really promising moving forward.
Yeah.
Marc, we talked about the need for Josh Giddey to be super aggressive, to take that 3-point shot. He did that. He was able to get open. He was able to get space. He was 2 of 4 from 3, only 4 attempts, but he took them when they were there, which is the most important thing for Josh. He let it fly.
Yeah, it was awesome. He met the challenge. I think he was up to it. I don't think he's ready to close games. That's going to be Patty. You got to have a little bit more optionality, but he's an innings eater. Like there's 40 minutes in a game. You can't ask Patty to carry you for 40. And he did a great job of eating those innings early and making sure that there was a point where Patty got to the end. He had juice to go finish, right? He had the juice, the energy. He didn't have to do the work early. Giddey did that. And I thought Giddey was really, really good. Giddey and Daniels attacking downhill early and beating Spain, came out going under on pick and rolls. And Giddey and Daniels really set the tone of we're going to get downhill. Giddey shot a few. He said, I'm going to shoot some, couple rescreens. I thought those two were phenomenal early, and they got him to the point where Patty had the juice at the end to bring him home.
A couple of comments I want to reference here. Thanks to everyone that's watching this live on YouTube. Really inconsistent calls from the official tonight, says Woody McGee. Really interesting profile picture you got there, Woody. But we need to talk about the officials a little bit. It'd be silly if we didn't mention that. We're not, affiliated with FIBA or affiliated with the IOC or anything like that. So we do need to reference the fact that these officials had let's just say a mare from an Australian perspective, which Marc means a nightmare. So we need to talk. We got to talk about that Will Magnay offensive foul compared to the Nick Kay foul. You and the three of us were talking about this pre-show, but that was a moment that you singled out as the inconsistency of the refs.
It's the worst. It's the absolute. As a player, you can adjust to anything. And early in the game, they set the tone. All right, we're going to call this tight. This is the standard, and that's what referees do. Early in the game, you understand what you can and cannot get away with. Yep. Okay, so if you bump me and I hit you back, well, that's a foul. Sure, no problem. So if Magnay takes the bump, eats it in the chest, he ate that one dead center in the chest. If he eats it in the chest and you don't call a foul on the bump, then what are we doing here? You can't have it both ways. Like, if you set the tone that it's going to be tight, then it's going to be tight. But you don't get to flip-flop. You don't get to change up in the middle of it. Players can't do that. You have to be consistent. You can't just go willy-nilly each call.
It's rough because, I think it gave Australia flashbacks to the last time they played Spain in a really big moment, Jacob. And there are a couple of tweets that referenced that earlier today. They got hosed by the referees. We saw Andrew Bogut do a little bit of this sort of action. And at different points in this game, it kind of felt like the world was a little bit against the Boomers. Now, they do play a physical defensive game, so that is potentially going to come back and bite them. But it was a little bit overblown at times.
It was. And to be fair as well, maybe I was trying a bit too hard to lean away from my Aussie bias, but I felt like there were some moments as well where that inconsistency sort of leaked across to Spain's side as well. It was as you say, Marc, you want consistency both sides of the ball for both teams. It felt like that wasn't there at times. Maybe it leaned a little bit more against the Aussies, but on the whole, you just want to have the same calls made across the entirety of the 40 minutes for both teams. And I think that's something we didn't quite have. But again, credit to the Boomers for just knuckling down and getting it done.
No
Now,
one signed up for Peacock to watch those three guys play. I didn't pay my $13 to Peacock to watch the three guys blow a whistle. Like, stop it. It's absurd. Call it one way and then stick with it.
It's $31 down here, Mark, for the Olympics, just quietly.
Oh,
So
the exchange rate really gets you, huh?
Exchange rate really gets us. I want to talk about the offense in the first half. You were in love with the cutting of the Boomers. They were able to find the right seams, the right space, the right moves, seemingly every time down the floor, which led to them having a bit of an offensive explosion to start the game and being super efficient. What did you love about the cutting of the Boomers?
I love that they were taking yes or no reads. You know, when the defense is aggressive and there are cuts backdoor, even if you get it or you don't get it, it's important to take them because it pulls the defense with you. You know, when you see the back of your defender's head, you don't stand. You find where the space is that you can cut into that's open, where the ball can get to you in a straight line. And I thought the Boomers did a wonderful job in the first half and then into the second half of finding those pockets of space and understanding I need to be where the ball can see me and get to me in a straight line and then play from there, whether they got it or not.
I want to reference a couple of comments now. Sergio Doole obviously couldn't miss at different points in there. I want to talk about the defense, but you're right to that comment. The heart rate was way too high. I think I struggled in that second half in particular. There were a couple of yell moments at my television from my couch. I was really lucky my children are sleeping at the other end of the house, and there's a couple of doors between them and I, because I did not appreciate the fouls nor the getting the Spanish shooters open. They were able to get really open really often, Mark. And, you know, this is one of those things where, you know, you might win through Spain only shooting 12 of 37 from three, but a lot of those were really, really good looks. You can't afford to do this against Canada.
Yeah, no, they've been playing an aggressive pick and roll coverage, and they went with a down. They downed the screen a little bit today. So they had done it before, but downing means you want the ball to go away from the screen. If you drop the big guy and you down it, you want it to go away from the screen. And if it gets to the screen, it's a jailbreak. There's nobody on the other side. And three of the Yule threes, whether it was him getting over the screen on a down, he had one on Josh Green, or there were a few other ones that were supposed to be down where he was first pass away and the ball got over, and then first help came over. Patty came over one time. And those actions, like, you don't want to give great shooters wide open shots from blown coverages. You know, if they make some, they make some, but you don't want to make it easier on them, especially early, to find rhythm.
Jacob, Canada are a different beast. They have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the best players in the world. You can't afford to let him off the leash. You can't afford to let Canada and some of the shooters that they have, or some of the high-level NBA players that they have, get off the leash. This comment caught my eye. Will be interesting to see the rotations and personnel used against Canada. Can you see that changing much from game to game? We had a win, the Boomers. So for Brian Goorjian, he might be looking at this and saying, well, I just need to keep doing the same thing. Maybe a slightly different look against Canada, but overall the personnel I can't see changing too much.
No, I think you're probably right. Although we have seen in the lead into this tournament that Brian Goorjian is happy to mix and match based on matchup. You know, Duop Reith, who didn't hit the court tonight and didn't for a lot of the leading games, he did come in against France, against the Twin Towers there, and his shooting was able to sort of stretch the defense out a bit more and make a difference there. So I think Brian Goorjian has built this roster with some flexibility in mind and guys that can fit different roles in different games. Having said that, I would be surprised if there were any really sweeping changes going into the game against Canada, because I think the lineups that were out there tonight, for the most part, translate pretty well into a matchup like that. But it's certainly a very different matchup, and it'll be interesting to see how the Boomers play it, because they were able to get this game on their terms and speed things up and hurry Spain along a bit. Canada's going to be a lot more comfortable playing at that pace with the NBA guys they've got and the style that they play. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what might change.
Marc, you've had a compound fracture of your finger, so we can probably reference you as an expert in this particular type of injury. Do you risk Dante Exum against Canada, as per that comment we just showed? Thanks to everyone for watching, by the way. Do you risk Dante Exum against Canada? Or alternatively, do you roll the dice with the list that you have, with the team that you have, knowing that you already have one victory banked, and you kind of can't afford to risk that Exum won't play in the knockout stages should you get that far.
Yeah, I think it's all on Dante. I mean, honestly, I had a compound dislocation, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing that he had. And they put the stitches in, and you just can't close anything. I think honestly, it's all up to him and pain tolerance, because anytime he touches the ball or anytime there's on the defensive end, somebody hits it, it's just going to be all up to him. I don't think there's anything where he can further injure himself worse. I think it's all about his pain tolerance and what he's got and how effective he is, honestly, like with the basketball in his hands, because it's not like this is on something that he doesn't use every single time he catches the ball or passes the ball or dribbles the ball. So it's really about like pain level 1, but also how he feels in terms of effectiveness using his hands, because they're kind of important in basketball.
Speaking of things that you can use every single time, the Podium Pod is brought to you by Team Feet. Team Feet offers premium athletic socks for modern teams. However they compete, with sweat wicking cotton, arch support, ventilation panels and compression stitching, Team Feet socks are built to outperform. Whether your team is tiny or 1,000 strong, Team Feet unites and excites your players and supporters with their combination of quality and performance. Join basketball teams around Australia and the world by choosing Team Feet for designs and worldwide delivery. Head to teamfeet.com. Jacob, that is called a transition, a perfect transition, might I add. And let's get into a perfect transition again by talking about our man. I've got his jersey back there, Jack McVeigh. We do have to reference him. I know, Marc, you didn't want to talk about him for too long, but we're both Tasmanians. We do have to reference Jack Jumper McVeigh. Jack was, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times at different points in this contest, because Jack is not scared to shoot. He wakes up every morning, literally, Marc, you're learning about Jack as we go, but he wakes up every morning, looks in the mirror and says, I make big shots. That's what he does. Every single day of his life, he does that. So Jack McVeigh did make some big shots. He did shoot. He was not afraid, but at the same time, he just kept fouling Santi Aldemar on three-point attempts and getting him to the line. He ended up with 4 fouls quite early in the game. So we saw that Jack was maybe a little bit overeager on those closeouts, and not maybe, he was. And on the offensive end, he found his groove. But I think the other thing I want to call out is the rebounding. The rebounding was exceptional from Jack tonight.
Yeah, I think we kind of lived out the full Jack McVeigh experience here over the course of 40 minutes. I think overeager was the right word defensively. He got caught a step behind a couple of times and then tried to sort of over adjust to that with those fouls on the perimeter. But as you say, it's the trade-off that you have to make. And I think Brian Goorjian's willing to make is he's not going to be the best defender on this team. He's not Nick Kay defensively, but you get that offensive punch, the big shot making. He'll take contested threes and make them. He's got a lot of confidence on that end of the floor. So that's the trade-off that you make. And it's one that kind of, I think overall might have played out in Australia's favor in this game. And the rebounding on top was sort of an added bonus, I think, that not many would be expecting in this kind of setting. So as you say, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, everything in between. But at the end of the day, he did make some big plays and had some good moments.
Marc, I want to reference the comments on the screen. Thank you to Duckray. I hope I've said that correctly. You can correct me in the comments as well, mate. But we want to talk turnovers and fouls. I want to start with fouls, because this is actually a topic that I'm going to talk about on our Opals preview show, because the Opals are making a nasty habit of over-fouling and sending their opponents to the foul line. There's a lot of bad fouls committed by the Boomers at different points in the game, and that led Spain to get back in the game. So if you combine the poor three-point defense, or the poor defense behind the three-point line at different times, giving Spain good looks with bad fouls, that's usually a really bad recipe for giving up a lot of points. It just so happens that Spain missed a lot of shots tonight. So obviously they were able to recover, capitalize, but those are the things that they should have to tidy up for the next game. Yeah,
I think some of the turnovers you can live with. You want to play faster, so you're going to have more turnovers. You're going to have more possessions. There's more chance for turnovers. I think there's some, like the Giddey behind the back one early into like traffic and two people. Those are the ones that you can live without. There are some you can live without, but you want to play faster. And if you want to play faster, because they don't want to get into a grinded out game. They can't space the floor as well. They don't have shooting. They need to play fast to have space to attack into. So fouls and turnovers will happen because you want to be more aggressive on defense to get the game going faster. And if you're playing faster, there's more possession. So I think you're going to have to live with some of those, some of those aggressive ones or some of the turnovers, but it's more about reeling in the ones that are like, all right, well, come on, that you don't need to try to thread a needle. If we're in the half court, we'll get in the half court. You heard early in the game on the broadcast, Gorge talking about we want to get into rip here and then into this, and you heard him late run it down. Like when you're in the half court, they have actions they can get to with Mills and Landale in a screen, and they have stuff where they can bring the dunker up, and get into a rip action. So they have stuff to go to that's good. It's just about not forcing actions when you're in that.
I want to talk about Dyson Daniels as well. I feel like we're touching on everyone on the team, but it's been an interesting game. We've finally seen the true boomers. We've finally, we've been speculating about how they've been playing, how they're going to play. Jacob, you wrote an article for pickandroll.com.au about the selection process and the Matisse Thybulle controversy. We've spoken about it on the sister podcast, Unwrapped. I've got a Matisse Thybulle jersey in the background that someone pointed out in the comments. That is a fair call. Shout out to Matisse. I still love Matisse. But this is why the selection choice was made. Dyson Daniels was exceptional on both ends. He has improved out of sight, Jacob.
Yeah, and I think the problem was it was a little bit too easy when comparing the two ahead of the tournament to say neither of them shoot that well from behind the arc, so we're going defense is the comparison. That's where the decision's made. But you look at what Dyson Daniels has been able to do in the warm-up games into this game tonight. Offensively, he just brings so much to the table. Yes, he knocked down a three. He's actually looking pretty confident from out there, but just the cutting and the finishing around the rim, he's able to, bring the ball up the floor, make some plays off the dribble for himself and others. Like, this is all stuff that Matisse Thybulle, for as good as he is defensively, he's not able to do, and I don't think he'll ever be able to do. So when you take all of that and you add in that Dyson Daniels is just insanely tough to get past when he's guarding the ball, he's been amazing. You could argue he's been Australia's most impressive and consistent player in the lead into the tournament, and he was just really good again tonight.
Marc, do you agree with all
Yeah,
those
give him
takes?
his flowers. It's unbelievable. I had a friend from our pod reach out from a friend from Melbourne talking about Matisse. I was like, this has to stop. It's got to. Dyson is incredible. It's got to stop. I've never seen so much anger for like an average kind of selection guy. Like, he was their 9th best in minutes in the World Cup. We're not talking about a guy who's a difference maker. Dyson is a difference maker. This guy plays point guard. He's shooting it. He's an absolute animal on the ball. He's an animal off the ball. Like, just lean into this guy. He is incredible, and he's going to be incredible for a really, really long time for the Boomers. I mean, wrap your arms around him. Like, he's one of your own. Be excited. He is great, and he just keeps getting better and better and better.
Sid brought us a comment around the 12-point margin. I mean, this is different to the NBA, Marc, in that every point matters. Every point you win by matters. Every point you lose by matters. The 12-point margin, I think, against Spain is a good margin, right? They're no slouch. Yes, they were a qualifier, but they've been one of the best teams in the world for the last 15 years. They're a great program. I think the key is that if you do lose either of your next 2 games, you can't be blown out. You have to lose by a bucket, 2 possessions. You can't afford to surrender a 10-point lead. If you find yourself down by 10 points late in the game, you've got to do everything you can and play every possession to try and get it to 6 points, to 5 points, and try and limit that as much as humanly possible. So, I mean, obviously against Greece, that might matter a little bit more in terms of we will know more about the first 2 rounds of this group. We will know either how far ahead or behind we are other teams. So that might influence how they play late. If they're up, they might choose to pull back. If they're far enough in front, if they're down, they might choose to go hell for leather to try and limit that margin as much as possible. But look, it's a good question. And it's one that you have to consider in all of these FIBA tournaments, Jacob. And I feel like, it always comes back to bite a team in a FIBA tournament that they simply got blown out by the wrong team at the wrong time, and that cost them a berth in the next round.
100%, and especially with how this tournament is set up, where you've got the 2 third-place finishers that'll go through. Like, that's that's going to come down to point differential. That's a fact. Like that's what's going to be the deciding factor for a team, whether they advance or they go home. So you're right. I think a double digit win in this group, anytime you can get it, is a real plus, and it takes not a little bit of pressure off, but it just gives you another sort of avenue looking forward to say, well, this is a nice thing to have in hand. This is something that we've done. We've banked these points, and now we move forward. But of course, ideally, the Boomers would want to win at least one of the next 2 games and take it out of the equation.
Dacre mentions, is this still the group of death? It absolutely is for me, because Canada are so good and Giannis exists. And Ben asks, which team are we more likely to get a win against? Well, that is probably Greece on paper, but at the same time, Canada are still a relatively young team, Marc, in FIBA play. They haven't played a whole lot of FIBA basketball together. They're highly talented, but Australia do have an advantage in terms of their experience in these sorts of environments that could serve them well.
Yeah, I think that, yes, still group of death, 4 great teams. There's not 4 great teams in any other group. And then Canada and Greece, one thing that we talked about on the preview pod is this Boomers team, and you saw it today when the chips were down and they met adversity. These guys are connected. They are tied together. They all know what their role is. They have role enthusiasm. They do not care who gets the credit. Like, they are in. And that's a recipe that's going to lead to success no matter who you play. And so Canada, Greece, they're capable of beating either team. They're capable of losing to either team. And it's going to be about how they play. Do they play Boomer style basketball? Do they punch first? Do they meet adversity and keep driving through and stay connected? But this is a team that's incredibly exciting to watch, and the people should be really, really happy watching this group together.
Well, we will be back in 48 to 72 hours time. Jacob, final point from you.
Sorry, I was just going to say that connection that you talked about, Marc, I think is really important, because last year's World Cup was such a transition with this group. There were players stepping into new roles and new pieces coming in. That connection wasn't really there. Familiarity has been such a plus for the Boomers over the years. That's where they've sort of bridged the talent gap with some other teams that they've been able to get over the top of. So I think the fact that they've seemingly been able to get that cohesion back in the span of one tournament, really, and look like that team again, that really cohesive unit again tonight and so far in the lead-in, is a real plus. I think the fact that they've been able to get back to that point does bode really well for this tournament.
I think it's credit to Gorge. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to wrap up, but I realized we haven't talked about Nick Kay yet. So finish making your point, Marc.
No, I think it's credit to Gorge, because even from the start, when the selection of, or the non-selection of Thibault, right? When you say, like, this is the way we're going to play, like Dyson, Green, Exum, Patty, Josh, like those guys, like there's something about, you're not looking over your shoulder. I'm riding with you guys. This is your role. This is what you're doing. And just having that cutthroat cut and being like, this is who we are, that sets the tone for everybody else. And we talked about Reith against France, Landale sitting down and be like, hey, this matchup, this is what we need to win this game. Come back, first game in the Olympics. Okay, it's your matchup, like you cook. And I think it all starts with Gorge and the tone that he has set with not only selections, but roles on the team and then leaning into it. You can't ask for more. We talked about consistency with referees. All you want is consistency from who's leading the charge. And he has been nothing but consistent, and they are in lockstep, and it's really exciting to watch.
Marc, 30 seconds on Nick Kay. You deserve it. After the article on pickandroll.com.au, talk about your boy.
Yeah, it was tough to see him pick up some really tic-tac ones early. I think it took him out of the game. He did save himself with one highlight, very non-Nick K-esque with the reverse layup, just really, really saucy there from him. But I think he'll feature much more as we get later into the tournament, in terms of when they play Giannis, he's going to be the one that guards him. And that's going to be an assignment that, for me, I'll be looking at, of like, they beat Greece or they lose to Greece. A lot's going to determine of like how he does in that matchup and how he meets Giannis in that moment.
Jacob, I'll give the final word to you. You won't be joining us until those knockout rounds occur again on the Podium Pod, but do you see 2 more victories for Australia, 1 more victory in this group round? What say you?
I think I'll say ahead of the preparation games for this tournament, I was worried that there might not be any victories. I'll be honest, I was a little bit pessimistic, but the way that this team's come together, it's remarkably possible that they could get 2 more wins. And if not, I think they're every chance to at least knock off a Greece and advance with some momentum into the knockout stages. So, as you say, I won't be back here until maybe the semi-finals, I think, and I'm more and more hopeful every day that the Boomers will be there for me to talk about.
I'm sure you will, Marc, Jacob. Thanks for being with us. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to pickandroll.com.au, as well as all of our feeds on the Podium Pod across Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and our sister podcast, Unwrap the Pick and Roll podcast as well. I'm Adam Webster. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on YouTube and across our podcast world. We will see you after the Canada game for the Boomers, and we will continue to talk Opals as well as we get through Paris 2024. Thank you for being with us.